Okay, so the first thing I want to do is give this div some styling. So I have a style in app.css called to-do app over here. I'm just going to give that for the to-do. So class name equals to-do app. So JSX is like HTML, just that you can use JavaScript with it, and it would be class inside HTML, but in JSX it's class name. So there's a few differences. Okay, so as you can see, we have this from this class name to do app, and we also want to create our first component. So we're going to make a source folder, new folder, call it components. So over here we're going to store all of our components. Okay. So the first component I want to make is the actual form, the input where the user adds his to do, and the button as well where he clicks add to do. So let's make a new file and we'll call it to do form.js. And I'm just going to do RFC. So this just creates a React functional component, and to do this you need to install an extension. It's called ES7 React Redux GraphQL React Native Snippets. I really recommend this. It helps out a lot with coding, with the ReactJS coding. So it just made me a functional component. Otherwise you would have to import React from React and then do the functional component yourself and return everything. So just do this. And all I want to do is actually import this to-do form component, this one, inside app.js. So to-do form, and this is how we use the component. So it automatically imported for me. If it didn't automatically import it for you, just import it like this. So import to-do form from /components, which is the path /to-do form. And then we need to close this, just like this. And now if I put like a hello world here, as you can see it's displayed over here. So we're basically just importing whatever's to-do form and putting it inside app.js. And app.js is being rendered inside index.js, which is being put in the root div inside index.html. So app.js to-do form. So over here we want to have a h1 that just says to-do list, so it's going to be our title. So to-do list, and this h1 is styled in app.css. So as you can see, it's big and it has a font, and it's kind of bold. Okay, so we can remove that hello world in to-do form, and now let's actually start creating our input. Okay, so let's remove all this and just do form and put our input inside here. So when the person submits this form, it would create our to do, but we're going to do that later. And and we're going to give this a class name of to do form, and the input will give it a class name of to do input. And let's see how that looks. As you can see, this is our input. The form doesn't show, it's just going to be used to check if the person has submitted this input. So clicks enter, or we're going to have a button that submits the form. Yes, and then when he submits it, we'll call a function that creates the to-do. So let's create the button as well. So button, and the class name is going to be to-do button. To-do button. As you can see, we have a button here, and let's just put add to-do. Add to-do. There we go. So the first thing we want to do to this input is actually give it a placeholder. So we want to tell the person to add this to do. So let's do that. So we'll go on to input placeholder equals add a to do. As you can see, it says add a to do over here. And then we can write whatever we want, and that goes. Okay. So now we want to create a state. So let's actually do that. I'll explain this in a bit. So const, and then make an array, and this is going to be a input, and then set input equals useState. useState is a React hook, so I'll explain that in just 1 second. And it's going to be set to an empty string. So just import this as well. Set useState. So from React, useState. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're creating a state, which is the input, and this input is pretty much like a variable for this component. It's a dynamic global variable, you can say, something like that. And this set input is a function that you call to change this variable. So that's what it's going to be. And once this is rendered, the state is going to be automatically set to an empty string. So whatever you put in here, so it could be an empty array, it could be null, could be false, up to you. But for now we're just going to set it as an empty string. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is actually change this input, the value of this input, based on what the person has put inside the input. So whatever he wants this to do to be. So we want the input to change based on whatever the person types in over here, like that. So how do we do that? So there's an onChange function. So we do that, and then we do an arrow function. This is ES6 syntax, and this gives us an event. And what we want to do with this event is get the value of that, which it gives us the value. So I'm just going to console.log it so you understand it. Console.log event. Just remove this. Okay. So whenever the value of the input changes, it's going to console.log us the event. So let me change the value. As you can see, everything is being changed. All the value is being changed, and it's console.logging it for us because we're doing onChange, passing the event, and then console.log the event. So as you can see, this is our event, right? And then we have a target. So where is it? Target. And then we have so many stuff over here. One of them is value. So if I control F value, as you can see, one second. Oh, it's over here. Yeah, so the value is SSS, whatever I typed in over here. So the value changes based. So now what we want to do is we want to change this input, the state input, based on the value of whatever the person typed in, which is going to be the value of the input. So whenever the onChange, so whenever the input changes, the value of the input changes. Remember, it was e.target the value. So we want to do set input, call the function to change this state. And then we just want to pass in the value, so e.target.value. So now whenever I type in something, the value of this input changes, and then when it changes, this passes it into set input and changes the input, the state input. So now that we're done with that, we also want to first I want to just show you something. So to make this code neater, we're going to use this extension if you've downloaded it. To make the code neater, we just have to do, if you're on Windows, do Alt Shift F, and if you're on MacBook, do Option Shift F, and that would make everything much neater. Okay,